what it looks like to keep the house for you is going to be completely different based on who you're married to and what century you're living in and who your kids are. And I mean, so much there has to be you taking ownership, and then you translate, like you figure it out. So God told you to do this, and then you look at your circumstances, and then you figure out how to make it happen.
Do you mind telling us about Even Exile?
Yeah. So Even Exile, I wrote what did we decide? 6 years ago?
It's 2016, maybe? I think, released.
However many years ago that is.
Yep.
And it was just sort of trying to take a look at feminism, the effects it's had on our culture, where it came from, and what we should do about it.
Awesome. So it's 2022 now. If, let's say, we were just talking about a TV show that almost happened, that you were featured in, if your career had gone big and you never got to write Even Exile, like if you set to write Even Exile right now, in 2022, how different would it be from the 2016 version?
Oh, man. Well, I feel like in some of the ways it would be a lot easier to make the point.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's so weird now. Everything is so crazy that even people who are maybe kind of, oblivious to the situation 6 or 7 years ago, probably can't be oblivious now.
Right.
Because it's just gotten stranger and stranger. I mean, it's just intensified the same old thing, but it's like.
Right. Because I assume this probably means you were writing it 2015-ish, which means, the election hadn't even happened yet.
No, so I don't think so.
It got very
feel
strange.
Like it was sort of presidential debate-ish times when I was writing it.
Yep.
And Bruce Jenner had just
I was going to say, maybe that was like the end of your reductio, and you're like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, look at that. And it's like, oh.
He's old news, you know?
Now he's Mr. Conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what an arc.
He's really gone around the merry-go-round on that one. So yeah, it's just gotten stranger, I feel like. And people who were probably not paying much attention to the situation now kind of have to, especially post-COVID when everybody was forced to get serious about their life.
And I feel like bread making made a huge comeback.
Right.
During COVID.
Domestic arts revitalized.
That's right. During COVID.
It's so true.
Everybody was just stuck at home.
I know.
Bored.
I too made sourdough during that time.
You started?
Because I can't cope with sourdough in my life right now.
Is that still something you're still doing?
No, because as soon as school started back up, that was the end of the sourdough. I killed it right there. I was trying to sort of train it to be tough, but it didn't. It just died.
Yeah. You didn't want a soft, mushy.
No, it has to deal with the really hard life in our house.
Not getting fed every day.
But it didn't. It was a sissy starter.
So on this podcast, this podcast is no stranger to the Mary Shelley and the Wollstonecraft being sort of a villain in some regards.
Okay.
You start there with sort of a history of. Do you mind talking a little bit about? Do you feel like there's anything there that have you gotten feedback on the history of feminism that you offer that people didn't know about? Or
actually, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who thought it was really helpful because they didn't really know where to come from. And it kind of feels like feminism sort of arrived in the 60s, but it really didn't.
It did not.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people felt like, oh, wow, that's something I didn't realize went back further.
So I went to public school, which is a huge confession I'm making currently. But I was actually talking with someone in the office the other day. I don't think I heard a full-on criticism of first-wave feminism until I read Chesterton's What's Wrong with the World in college, maybe.
Okay.
I think I usually always heard, like, of course, second, third, and all the other waves. Those are crazy. But, like, first, they had to really deal with some.
Right.
There were some things that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about first wave? Like, that's not necessarily the way you've taken it.
Yeah, I feel like people are really naive about that because I think it was all there in first wave feminism. It hadn't
stuff
fully...
in like the later waves.
Yeah, it was all packed in there. It just hadn't really unfurled itself all the way yet.
Okay.
And so because it hadn't, there were bits of it that were maybe seemed sensible. And I do think a lot of the Christians who weren't thinking really precisely or in kind of worldview categories
Yep.
just signed on to stuff they shouldn't have signed on to back then. And it was because, you know, I mean, a good lie always has some truth in it.
Yeah.
And so there were some really good points, I think, that they had, but then they tried to address them the completely wrong way. And so there's a lot of people that still would think Susan B. Anthony is fantastic stuff, but it's like there's a very straight line between her and what the second wave feminists are getting up to.
Someone like on their knees shrieking about Donald Trump or something of that nature, you know?
Well, yeah, because like her little buddy, you know, Elizabeth Cady Stanton,
yeah,
I think she wouldn't, now I'm going to get my historical facts muddled up, but I think she was very much in favor of women being in control of whether or not they have children.
Okay.
She just took the route of not sleeping with her husband because there wasn't any birth control that was legal.
Yeah.
But that was kind of her thing. And I think she wouldn't take her husband's name, or the wedding vows were different. You know, anyhow.
She was going to keep her dad's.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because that's how independent women do it. So anyway, it was all there. It was just there in sort of more seed form. And people should have, and many people did see what was coming, but a lot of people didn't.
I'm curious what would you think, like how would if you were to sort of gather some of the figureheads that you write about, so Wollstonecraft, Shelley, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, if you put them all like at a table for dinner, like do you think they would get along with one another?
That's an interesting question, because I bet the later feminists would have shocked probably even the early ones.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't have been shocked. You know, like if they could fast forward 100 years and see what was happening.
Do you think it would be shocked in a way that's like what they're doing in public kind of thing? So like, I think it was in Monsters of the Id where Byron, well, this is connected, I guess. So with the Shelley thing, during their summer of all kinds of crazy things. Yeah. And learning about all that was like very appalling. It wasn't just sort of like telling ghost stories around a campfire. Yeah. But so given all these appalling sexual acts that were occurring, Byron got a letter from home that they were now doing the waltz in public. And he was just like absolutely mortified.
Oh, that's funny.
As he was like at Lake Geneva doing things that would like make probably our feminists blush.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be something like that where it's like they have this sort of does that make sense?
Yeah, like there's still like this kind of decency, remnants of the older order that they still have. Yeah, totally. Because I think that despite all the bad stuff that Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were trying to create, I think they still were in a society that was far more proper than we are today. And I'm sure they would be shocked, but they would have no right to be, since that's what they were brewing up. I mean, I just remember like as a kid, we would somehow, when babysitters were over, we would talk them into letting us mix up strange concoctions in the kitchen, you know, that had like a lot of mayonnaise chunks floating around in there and some other stuff we found in the fridge and like a lot of, and then we'd try to get the babysitter to taste it.
Would they do
the really sweet ones would.
Sure.
But I feel like it's sort of like that, where it's just like at the end you didn't create something magical.
We actually don't like any of this. It. Yeah, right. Well, it's all, you know, the Wollstonecraft maybe is like a very tragic example of like she advocated for something and really lived it. Like she went hard. Yeah. And I don't think
she had to be honest, she though might have been cooler with it. I feel like the American feminists had the much more, I mean, they were teetotalers.
That's right.
They were, you know, they were straight-laced kinds of ladies, but Wollstonecraft was not. And she was in France for the entire Reign of Terror, which means she was there for some pretty gnarly social behavior.
Yeah. So it was a weird time.
I think she's still ahead of us on the road.
She probably is, yeah.
Yeah, so.
And had a daughter who, like we said with the Geneva thing, was also vaguely ahead of everyone. Yeah,
exactly. And so, I don't know. Was that before or after Byron tried to buy the 11-year-old girl?
I had to be like around the same time, I think. Yeah. Yeah. It's not good.
No. Her parents said no thanks.
The romantics were very weird.
They were terrible.
Well, good for their parents.
Yeah.
Should be said. Good for their parents.
Exactly.
I always just wonder in terms of how they might get along, or like would they be friendly to one another, or we all line them up and like similarly how you've done. But I don't know if they would even like each other.
Yeah, it's true. And I would think that probably if you have like Margaret Sanger would probably be proud of Gloria Steinem, you know.
Yep.
But I'm not sure that Susan B. Anthony would be proud of Gloria Steinem. You know, like they all had their kind of like different pieces that they were working on. And I do think that the first wave American ones seem to be pretty, kind of Karens really is what they seem to be.
And that, so with the Karen thing attaching to sort of the teetotaler mission, can you talk a little bit about that? I imagine there's plenty of people who would be like, well, first wave was great, but then you also know that they're going to take away like your afternoon cocktails also. You may have like pumped the brakes a little bit.
I know, but that might be too why they seem like they were probably very pious, you know, because look, they're so pious that they're even opposed to alcohol. So that must mean that they're like super scrupulous. And you know, that was just a weird project. And I think it's really funny comparing them to like what was going on in Europe, because the sort of proto-feminist, before we even got to the Susan B. Anthony times, they were, I mean, it was about free love and trying to get rid of marriage. And it was very much ahead down the road from where the Americans were. And their stuff was much more, we're going to try to boss people around and take away their alcohol.
It is a little bossy, It feels weird now. So we're days after the leak has happened.
Yeah.
The New York Times has reached out. You've given your takes in very like prestigious.
Luckily for everyone, I did.
Very prestigious media outlets. It's funny watching now where since Roe is being taken away, it almost feels like there's sort of like a maniacal like Girardian just like rip back. It may not. I mean, of course, it's about killing babies, but it also feels like it's the added dimension of like a tug. You know, like you're quick, like you're taking it back.
Yeah.
With you mentioned control.
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of all of that as well? Like, is this
the sort of feminist freak out over Roe?
Even maybe like, especially with American feminists, maybe, or the American side of like the bossy side.
I mean, I feel like that bossy side is the only side, really. I mean, it's like, they're always shrieking and complaining and marching and stomping and, you know, like it's not winsome.
It was really great. An early like video came out the night they were barricading the courthouse, and there was already like bickering people on the same side. or you know, and I was just like, you know, I don't know that this like could last for very long.
No, you don't. It's like it has to have something else to feed on, and right. And it's like it's almost devoured the whole country by now, and there's not a lot left.
Right.
But if Roe gets overturned, that would be really something. I don't know what that would kick off. Did you think you would have
seen it in your lifetime?
No, especially not in such a weird moment like right now.
Right now?
Yeah. Sort of.
You mean during the war in the Ukraine? You know, if you remember that, that's happening as well.
I do remember that. Yeah, we're just moving very swiftly from Will Smith to the Ukraine to Roe to, you know, Johnny Depp. It's like we can't... it's very tough to keep up.
It really is. Did you give your takes to the New York Times on anything else?
No, we didn't get around to that.
Okay.
We didn't. But one thing I did say that they did not quote.
Okay.
I do think it's funny because everybody now is so concerned with being on the right side of history, you know, just the right side of the arc.
Because how embarrassing.
How embarrassing to be looked back on as those horrible people. And I just was like, at no point, if you look at history, were the ones arguing that a certain class of people were not really people. And that's why we can deny them their basic rights. Those are never the good guys. They do not get revealed by history as, you know, the champions.
Inspiring.
And, you know, I just feel like, if the Supreme Court does this, I think they really will be remembered as the heroes who did it.
One thing about your book, so you cover the history of feminism aspect. One thing that I very much enjoy, but I also think maybe you shouldn't have done.
Okay.
Did you ever consider just sort of making, or maybe not, that's not the way I want to say it. I like that you made it to where, well, you're not offering like a Jane Austen how-to or like, so not that, but instead, this is what we're headed. You know, this is where it's at. Okay. You sort of just shifted the world. There wasn't, now it feels like when someone finishes your book, there's a lot to do.
Yeah, hopefully.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what are you advocating for? Like, what kind of person are you advocating for?
Yeah, so I guess somebody who is ready to be hardworking and creative and entrepreneurial, I guess, in a sense, because if you are an entrepreneur, as I'm sure you don't know anything about that, nobody is standing there giving you a checklist. I mean, you have to go out and make it happen yourself. And if someone did hand you a checklist for you to get done by 5 o'clock today, then you're not an entrepreneur. You're working for somebody else.
You would like to get paid by the end of the day also, which is not going to happen. So
exactly. And so I just think I would love it if women acted like that. And we're trying to build something that nobody was standing there explaining over their shoulder exactly what it needed to look like, you know?
So what you're describing is the kind of person, it feels very hard.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened? Like, where do you feel like, where did that kind of woman go?
Yeah, I think it did seem to happen when life got easier and you could get by with less, you know?
Can you say more about that? What do you mean?
Yeah, so the sort of mid-century, post-World War II technology making everything easier. Yep. And life just got, you know, central heating and vacuums and TV dinners and, you know, you just didn't have TVs. Yeah. You didn't have to work as hard to maintain a standard of living. Yep. And so they didn't keep pushing themselves. They just kind of settled into comfortable. Yeah. And then what was probably sort of like basic survival things before just became easy. And then they stayed there. And then they just kind of got sick of it, which you would, because, you know, when you're not being challenged and you're not pushing yourself and you don't have anything you think is that worthwhile or fulfilling, it's kind of boring.
Is there something, so with that sort of, that arc, do you think there's anything particular to Christian women in that arc? Is there something about Christian women maybe that you see happening
now, or like mid-century Christian women?
From there to now, or you maybe start now.
Well, I think that feminism really destroyed something there in the middle, where a lot of women are having to do a lot of remedial work to get up to speed again, because there are generations, like things that would have been handed down sort of mother to daughter for, you know, centuries. Yeah. Just got completely erased from our cultural memory.
Sort of like an inheritance of domestic arts.
Yeah.
I don't know if did you guys talk about this on the podcast? There's a book or a whole website of, I think, Italian grandmothers.
Yeah, the pasta grannies.
Can you talk about that? The pasta grannies?
I'm all over it with the pasta grannies.
Yeah, can you tell us about that? What is that?
It's just little videos of these old ladies in Italy in these tiny little kitchens making handmade pasta, and they're just regional specialties. They're like, oh, you only get this in, you know, the mountains, wherever, and this is the thing they've been doing forever, and they're just rolling them by hand and shaping them by hand, and you can just tell they've been doing this for decades, and they're so good at it. Yeah. And they make these, you know, crazy little noodles or whatever. And those are the sorts of things that are being lost because everybody thinks that's cool to watch, but nobody wants to invest in becoming that little old lady. Right. We would rather look 22 forever.
Yeah. Because it's funny, and I guess how we think of like time and economy of time and efficiency. I assume those women probably spent like hours and hours and hours on a meal. Yeah. Which obviously there are things that are nice now that helps with that. But at the same time, they have like the imaginative capacity to think like it's all worth the time and effort.
Yeah. And it also just looks like it actually is none of these are like wealthy women. They're just little old ladies in their little apartment in the city somewhere or in their little farmhouse. You know, it's just, it's not a upscale thing.
Yeah. And I think you guys were saying that the project was basically based on like basically that generation is sort of the last generation of Italian women who know that stuff.
Yeah. And if you follow them at all, it's like, these little old ladies, like some of them are 100 or whatever, but it'll just be a little announcement that, remember, we filmed her, she died today. I mean, it really is like just trying to preserve this sort of record of something that's about to be gone.
Okay.
And I think feminism really did a number on that. And it's kind of like they threw a bunch of stuff into the bottom of the ocean, and it's like, well, it's gone.
There it goes.
It's down there now.
Yeah. Someone highly motivated will have to go get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I do think that there are a lot of Christian women now who are trying to rebuild something out of kind of just the rubble and having no clear direction on what is it we're trying to build and what's it supposed to look like. And that's something that no one person can, it's going to take all the women investing, and then we'll see what we build. But
that's almost where I was trying to ask, like, did you consider maybe just like a 3-step plan or something we could sell? Like, if you thought about maybe something like that, there we go. Yeah. We could just send like a domestic art kit, and then they would be set. And if we just told them by that.
Yeah, perfect.
You've sort of done the opposite, I guess.
I did do the opposite. And I think that actually has been sort of frustrating for some ladies. And to be honest, I think there has to be a lot of practical help. Like, I think that really needs to happen because of just the simple fact that a lot of these things are gone, and you really do need to be taught. It's not like you're going to just magically figure out how to do things by yourself.
Right.
And so that teaching and the practical stuff is really necessary. But I feel like first you have to have a vision for, the big picture, so you don't get confused into thinking that the little practical helps are the end in themselves, but rather that's like sort of the catapult towards something else.
Yeah. So it's actually just like a mind shift. And now you're like, do stuff, I guess, now.
And like I have heard my dad use the example about when the first, pilgrims arrived in North America, how many jobs were waiting for them. I was like,
401ks.
There were no jobs waiting for them, but there was a lot of work. And I feel like that's where we are now, is there's a lot of work. If you just roll up your sleeves and do it, it's not like there's easy job descriptions that are a one size fits all.
I imagine, so you do a podcast with your sister, what have you. I used to help more with stuff, so I would see a lot more of questions that would come in and things like that. For you, I wonder, reading the questions, and I would imagine, like, I wonder what they would do with this question, or so much of like what have you is what you guys are just doing at 1,000 miles an hour to some degree. Mm-hmm. It's way less about like, I now do this because we're women who do that, or you mentioned like bread wasn't a thing you were doing always, or
not sourdough anyway.
How do you, I mean, like with like soup stuff, and you've had every grade of the new St. Andrews comes over, and there's, how do you like encourage someone into that kind of thing where it's like, this is all basically just stuff you're doing, actively doing.
Right. How
do you encourage someone like that? Like, or onto that? Like, I imagine that's the frustrating part.
Yeah, it is, because you can't be ultra specific for each woman. And actually, I think this is one of those things where I think it's so clear that the Bible was inspired by God and not written by humans, because if it was written by humans, we would have gotten really, really bureaucratic. And it's like Paul says women are supposed to be modest, but he doesn't start getting into thread count and toga lengths and things that would suddenly be obsolete as soon as you went to a different culture.
Right.
And I just saw, I don't even know if this is real, but somebody was sharing around on Facebook. It was a list of rules from some really crazy church. And it was funny. It was like the things we do and don't do here in this church. But it was stuff like, do not have dingle dangles hanging from your rear view mirror. Do not iron double creases into your pants. Do not, I mean, it was like a lot of stuff. Well, the church is real
Okay.
and all the names in it were real and everything. So unless somebody made up a fake list of rules,
This isn't
it was like 100 and some don'ts.
This isn't Christchurch in Moscow, is it?
Guessed.
Yeah.
I know, but it's
checking.
just so many things. Like men,
Yeah.
you may only wear white or light blue dress shirts. Do not leave the house without an undershirt on beneath your top shirt. You may not own anything that has Nike on it at all. I mean, just stuff, you know. Don't ever let children make animal noises. I mean, there's a lot of things. And I feel like that is exactly what happens when people start trying to legislate. I mean, just look at our own legislative code. It's ridiculous. I just learned at a lecture at NSA the other night, it's illegal to transport a water orchid seed across state lines. It's like a federal offense. So I'm just saying,
You're not admitting
humans
anything.
Humans are like that. Like we get into ultra specific stuff.
That's good.
And Paul says, keep the house. And he doesn't then give us a huge list of things that have to be done every morning by 9:45. But humans do tend to get into those
kinds of things.
Yeah. And so
especially with the higher stakes, I feel like the higher the stakes, the more we're gonna just
and so I think that if we tried to come up with a list of every housewife shall do thus and such, it just descends into that really petty tendency that we all have. And I think
inner bossy.
Yeah. And it's
feminist.
interesting that the Bible just doesn't descend into that. So it actually remains pertinent and relevant across centuries and across civilizations. And so what it looks like to keep the house for you is going to be completely different based on who you're married to and what century you're living in and who your kids are. And I mean, so much there has to be you taking ownership and then you translate, like you figure it out. So God told you to do this, and then you look at your circumstances and then you figure out how to make it happen.
Depending on your own imagination, you know, your own leaf mold, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How do you decide what to put on your walls?
On my actual walls?
Yes.
Oh, see, it kind of happens to me. That's the problem.
This was a particular question from Forrest Dixon. He wants to know why Maxfield Parish.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question. You've tapped into a deep vein here.
This is what we were
So
looking
you mean
for.
pictures, not my wallpaper?
Yes.
Because see,
maybe both.
The problem is I was going to be very adult and very mature, and I was going to have super neutral colors. They were going to be very
mature.
Yeah, they were going to be like sophisticated neutrals. Then I was going to do color and things you can switch out. No.
But what happened?
Now I just have like crazy I don't know. That's why I said it just happens to me, I'm afraid. But
so if anybody wants to go see you had a conversation with your dad.
Yeah.
In your home.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
That wallpaper is awesome.
Well, yeah, and that one I designed and printed and then put up much against my own better judgment, but I did.
Okay.
And so it, like I said, it just sort of happened. And what happened was I started designing wallpaper just for my one little tiny entryway because our house was a crazy wallpaper house when we bought it. So I was like, we'll just do a nod to the wallpaper, and then I couldn't stop. It just spread.
So you didn't actually solve the wallpaper issue. You sort of just let it. You like poured water on it. You just let it grow. That's awesome.
It's like
Parish,
a fairy ring. There it went. So Maxwell Parish, one of those pictures that's hanging above my couch was like my great grandmother's, I think.
Okay.
And it was just always in our house growing up, kind of around. And I remember being really fascinated by it when I was a kid. And I've always liked Maxfield Parish, but I always was like, I would never hang Maxfield Parish in my house because it would just be
not adult.
Yeah, not adult. It's
right.
And then look, it happened again. But I do like the old prints because if you look at the actual colors Maxwell Parish uses, they're crazy, beautiful, amazing colors. But it's very kind of fairy tale book for kids kinds of illustrations, which I was like, it'd be great in a kid's room, but not in the living room.
The non-adult rooms.
It's in the living room.
That's right.
But it's the old prints that look a little more muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do like those. I've just picked those up like in antique stores when I've seen them in.
One, I suppose, benefit of the timing of the documentary is if anybody watches, you look very busy.
Yeah.
And how did that line up? Did Alec just catch you as like you were doing things?
Alec really captured the most authentic life.
Yeah.
And he's had to clean way too much of my house.
Alec has? Yes. Alec was cleaning?
Yes.
Yeah.
He'd be like, that window is really dirty. And so he'd come and cleaning the backsplash in my kitchen, taking the garbage out. It just,
wow.
Alec, a lot.
Yeah.
He did a lot.
Dedicated.
Moving weird hunks of sheetrock. But usually I will say it was very much like, I was in the middle of whatever that was.
So what's going on? Your house?
Well, our house is just perennially under construction. Okay. So the first part, the front of the house is more first world, and then it descends into third world by the time you get to the kitchen.
Got it.
But of course, we made a whole bunch of progress on the kitchen, but after we were done filming.
Oh, filming. Okay.
So I was like, someday we'll have to revisit.
It might be nice to have a follow-up.
Yeah, to be like, we did. But we're not there yet. Okay. We're just a little better. The idea is a little better than we were.
Never be there.
I know. Well, hopefully the kitchen will.
Do you have that fear? Do you have a fear that it just won't end?
Like it's some sort of spiritual warfare situation.
Yeah.
The already sort of not yet is kind of coming to pass.
Yeah, where you do have the entryway, but
yeah. I hope that the kitchen will be there. Like every time it sort of looks like we might have a big moment that we could, tear it up, get it done. Something else happens. So right now we're planning a wedding. So the kitchen is a little bit on pause, but we'll come back to it. We'll circle back to the kitchen. Yeah. So there's a lot of things. Yeah. You too.
Hey, thanks.
So
one big question I had for you was I had heard this was something on What Have You quite a while ago.
Okay.
And I don't think it's ever been brought back up. And I think it should be.
Okay.
Have you yet read Lee Fanger's Peace Like a River?
Yeah. See, I was worried somebody would bring that back up someday.
Yeah. No? You don't plan on reading it?
Well, I don't know if I don't plan on it. I just haven't planned
to read it. Yeah.
Should I? Are you another one of the voice
I think
of the multitudes telling me?
But now almost I feel like everyone's devolving into you just won't do it. So now it's like come to just like
now it becomes like a stubbornness problem.
And like now the other side's getting stubborn. Just do it. Do it.
We might have reached a stalemate. I don't know.
Is there a lot of things? I mean, I imagine book recommendations for your family, I assume, are high caliber recommendations. Or anyone listening would be like, well, I mean, if these are high caliber recommendations and you have no problem
passing by.
Don't care.
Exactly. And no, I just don't. Plus, I'm just not in the mood for a poignant memoir type situation.
Is it because you looked at the cover once and you're like, that's not for me? That cover is not for me. The title.
I think what it is, okay, so life is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't have much time to read.
Sure.
Unless I'm sitting on an airplane.
Okay.
Which is the time where I'm like, ooh, I might read something for fun.
Sure.
But that's the moment that you have on an airplane. I have to read because I'm teaching. So, I spend a lot of time in books, but it's not like, oh, I think I'll read a novel.
You spend time in like Grecian tales of
exactly. Or
this or that.
Byron and Shelley or whatever. And so when I want to
separate the art from the artist, Rebekah, and these kinds of things.
You do sometimes have to, but other times you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when I sit down to read a fun novel, I never feel like a poignant memoir sounds
Who told you poignant memoir? Is that a blurb?
I feel like that's what it
looks
is.
Like it.
It looks like a poignant memoir.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm not somebody who likes to cry for fun. And so like
much like Nate and Rachel, who have been really pushing the book.
They just love to get together and have a little weep.
Yeah. No, you're right. No, I get it.
Yeah. Get it. No, it's like, I just would be like, maybe I'll read it someday. Right now I'll read a Woodhouse.
Right.
Or something else.
Well, that's, fair enough.
Yeah. But I was even given a copy.
Were you? This is going to haunt you forever.
Yeah. So it's there. I have it and I'm poised and ready.
I feel like someone should have like taken the cover off of it. So you aren't looking at like a misty blue,
right,
poignant memoir of a cover.
I mean, is it poignant? And is it a memoir?
It's not a memoir, I don't think. Ish.
Does it read as if it's a memoir?
Lee Finger's great.
I think he's not answering my question.
And whoever told you they cried, that was not a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't cry. Maybe I'd have a heart of stone.
You could.
Not
you
sure.
I guess we'll find out. That should be its own podcast
yeah,
series.
Like I'll come back and report if I cried. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Even just live react. I mean, we could do several episodes saga.
Me reading aloud.
Yeah,
waiting
aloud
to see if my voice catches.
Yeah, everyone's waiting just for. Yeah, something like that. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Becca, I don't have anything else for you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, everyone go watch.
Yeah.
Even Exile, mycanonplus.com.
Exactly.
Thank you, Becca.